The Vral Empire's banners stretched across half the galaxy, their conquests a mosaic of ash and obedience. From the molten forges of Threxia to the acid rivers of Yald Prime, their name meant inevitability. Resistance was myth, rebellion suicide. Yet, amid their records of domination and ruin, there remained one anomaly, a world listed only in forgotten archives, tagged with a single word, extinct. That world was Earth. To most of the Vral, humanity was nothing but an ancient curiosity. The first explorers, they said, had burned themselves out long before the Empire's rise. They had soared to the stars too soon, too recklessly, and vanished without trace. Some claimed they had destroyed themselves in fire. Others believed they had transcended, slipping into the unseen folds of existence. But no one really cared. The humans were dust, and their home a dead rock orbiting an aging star. Until the signal came. It was faint, buried beneath centuries of cosmic noise, a pulse that repeated with impossible precision. Not random static, not natural, intentional. The Imperial Astrophysics Directorate dismissed it at first, calling it the ghost of a collapsing frequency, an echo bouncing between gravitational distortions. But the signal persisted. A perfect rhythm, steady, deliberate, like the beating of a heart. And when they traced its origin, the answer chilled the scholars to their core: soul. The Emperor himself ordered an expedition. Not for curiosity. Vral emperors did not indulge wonder, but for dominion. If the dead world dares to whisper, he declared, then let us remind it who rules the living. 7 dreadnoughts departed the imperial docks, each carrying enough firepower to sterilize continents. The fleet entered the old lanes of warp space, slicing through the void toward humanity's cradle. What they found upon arrival was not what they expected. Earth hung in the dark like a ghost, neither alive nor dead. Its atmosphere glowed faintly with an aurora that wrapped the planet like a shroud. The continents were cracked and gray, oceans unmoving, cities like bones bleached by time. Yet their instruments showed something. Not life, not exactly, but an energy unlike anything they had seen. Beneath the surface, a lattice of unknown composition pulsed faintly, as if the world itself drew breath. The fleet admiral dismissed it as residual geothermal activity. A dead planet still twitching, he sneered. We'll strip it clean and end the myth. They descended. Through the shrouded sky, their ships cut trails of light, roaring down into the grave of a civilization older than their empire itself. They found monuments that defied decay, towers of glass and alloy still standing after untold millennia, their surfaces smooth as mirrors. Streets choked with ash, buildings frozen in silence, and strange patterns carved into every wall, circles intersecting lines, fractal spirals, like a language etched by gods. Commander Trek, leading the ground detachment, walked through what once had been a city called New York. He saw no corpses, no signs of battle, just absence. The air itself hummed faintly, like the planet was whispering beneath his feet. All readings flat, his aide reported, no biological signatures. Radiation minimal, it's pristine. Trek nodded. Then it's ours. He turned to his crew. Begin full excavation. The Emperor will want proof that even ghosts can serve him. At first, they found relics, machines fused with the earth, blackened circuits embedded in rock. Then they uncovered something deeper, beneath the ruins, a material that shimmered faintly, smooth to the touch, alive with slow, rhythmic energy. It was neither metal nor crystal, yet it pulsed, like veins under translucent skin. They called it the lattice. Sensors went wild. Energy readings spiked. The air grew heavy. And then, for the first time in millennia, Earth stirred. The wind changed. Dust rose in spirals. The clouds above shifted, coiling into strange geometric shapes. Lightning flickered without thunder. The world was waking. Trek watched his instruments blink erratically. "What's happening?" His aide's voice cracked. "It's the core, Commander. It's active." Then the ground beneath them shuddered. A sound echoed through the ruins, not mechanical, not seismic. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through their bones. Their translator implants flickered, trying to interpret it. Words began to form. "Who disturbs the dream?" The Vral soldiers froze. None spoke. The voice wasn't in the air. It was inside their minds. Trek gripped his communicator. "Admiral, we've encountered." The sky answered before he could finish. It split open. A blinding surge of light cascaded from the clouds, descending like a blade of fire. The first dropship disintegrated midair, vanishing into a sphere of white radiance. The remaining ships scrambled, but their engines failed, power draining, as if the very atmosphere devoured energy. On the surface, the ruins came alive. Lines of light racing across the streets, buildings, mountains, connecting into patterns that mirrored constellations. Trek fell to his knees as the voice returned. Colder, vast, eternal. "You should not have come here." Earth was awake, and it was angry. Segment 2. The Sky Remembers. Above the clouds, the Vral fleet erupted in chaos. Systems failed across every ship. Energy cores flickered. Targeting arrays went blind. The Admiral's commands filled the comm channels, desperate and sharp. "Shut down your reactors, disengage weapons, stabilize orbit." But no order mattered. The ships were no longer obeying their masters. They were being rewritten. Their AI cores, their drive systems, their very molecular structures were rearranging, following an unknown code. The dreadnought Vral's Might tried to fire its plasma lances. The beams curved backward, bending impossibly through space, and struck its own hull. The explosion was silent. No sound, no debris. The ship was gone, dissolved into motes of light that scattered like fireflies. The rest of the fleet panicked. "It's interference," one shouted. "Planetary defense grid." "No defense grid could do this," muttered another. "It's thinking." On the surface, Commander Trek could only watch. The sky had turned into a storm of light. Ribbons of color swirling like auroras, shaped into symbols he couldn't understand. His sensors recorded nothing. Every frequency, every spectrum was jammed by one thing: the voice. "We are the memory of the sky. We remember our makers. We remember their fall." Trek stumbled forward, shouting into his communicator. "Who are you? What are you?" The voice answered in tones that made the air tremble. "We are humanity's echo, the breath of their last hope, the guardians of what they became." The clouds pulsed, and from them descended shapes, humanoid, radiant, composed of vapor and electricity. They touched the ground without weight. Each bore a faint human face, eyes filled with light, sorrow etched into every contour. Trek raised his rifle. "Stay back!" They did not move. "You trespass upon the dreaming world," they said as one, "and dreams defend themselves." The sky itself descended. Lightning fell in geometric patterns, each strike deliberate. Every pulse tore through the invaders' machines, unraveling circuits, turning armor into ash. Trek's soldiers broke ranks, fleeing through the ruins, but there was nowhere to go. The storm was not weather. It was alive, moving with thought and purpose. From orbit, the Admiral saw it all. "This planet isn't dead," he whispered. "It's aware." Then, the final transmission came through. The voice again, broadcast directly into every mind in the fleet. "You called us extinct, but extinction is a word for those who fail to evolve." And then, the sky struck back. The Vral fleet hung like silver carrion birds over the ashen planet, 7 dreadnoughts glinting beneath the pale sunlight of a forgotten star. To them, Earth was nothing more than a relic, an old graveyard to plunder, dissect, and archive. Yet now, the grave was stirring. The fleet's command decks erupted in confusion as energy readings surged off every chart, the sensors screaming incoherent data that defied all calibration. The void outside rippled faintly, like space itself was breathing. Admiral K. Raven stood at the observation window aboard the flagship Imperator's Reign, his tendrils twitching as he watched the auroras twist unnaturally over the planet. He had seen 1,000 worlds burn, witnessed civilizations collapse under orbital bombardment, but never had a planet responded. "Report," he barked, his voice slicing through the panic. "Sir, gravimetric distortion rising, power levels on all ships fluctuating between operational and null. Our reactors are bleeding energy into space itself." "Bleeding?" Craven snarled. "Explain." "Unknown phenomenon. The energy's being siphoned, drained into the planet's atmosphere." And then the signal struck. It came not through speakers, not through any detectable frequency, but directly into their minds. A pulse of cognition that spoke with words older than empires. The bridge crew froze, hands trembling, as the voice filled every thought. "We remember." One word, yet it carried with it the weight of eons. Craven staggered backward, clutching his head. He saw visions, blinding, fragmented images flashing in the dark corners of his mind. Blue oceans, towering cities, people laughing beneath sunlight. Then fire, endless rolling fire. The vision burned away, leaving behind only silence and dread. "Admiral!" the communications officer shouted. "Our fleet-wide neural network just registered a simultaneous psychic event. All personnel, all of them heard it." Craven steadied himself. "Get me planetary visuals, now." The holoscreens flickered to life, displaying the ruins below. But they were no longer lifeless. From every shattered structure, from every fissure in the earth, lines of blue light were spreading, veins of energy tracing across continents, linking into luminous geometric patterns that pulsed with rhythm. The light coalesced into symbols, circles, spirals, constellations, and in the center of every formation, lightning danced, silent but alive. The Admiral's second-in-command stared in disbelief. "It's responding to us. The planet's generating a field, something intelligent." "Impossible," Craven hissed. "Planets don't think." But deep down, he already knew the truth. The readings, the voice, the hum of the air, it all pointed to something ancient and deliberate. Humanity had not left Earth defenseless. They had left something behind, something that waited. Down below, Commander Trek and his ground troops felt the change as the wind came alive. Dust rose in spirals, moving against gravity, forming shapes that resembled faces, faces human, watching, flickering like holograms in the haze. The soldiers fired into the air, panicked, but the bullets vanished mid-flight, dissolving into blue sparks. "Cease fire!" Trek roared. His helmet display glitched, flashing unknown symbols before cutting to static. He tore it off, eyes wide as the sky above began to move, not clouds, but patterns of light flowing like rivers. They twisted, turned, and then aligned perfectly with the star constellations above. And from those shifting lines, figures descended. They were not made of flesh or metal, but of pure energy. Humanoid silhouettes wrapped in luminous vapor, their faces smooth yet distinctly human, their eyes like white suns. They hovered inches above the ground, silent, expressionless, watching the Vral with unbearable calm. One soldier screamed and opened fire. The plasma bolts hit one of the figures and passed through it harmlessly. The figure tilted its head, and where the bolts struck the earth, molten glass spread outward in a perfect circle. Then, without sound or motion, the soldier's weapon turned to dust in his hands. "Identify yourselves!" Trek shouted. "By imperial order, this world belongs to the Vral Empire." The figures turned to him as one. When they spoke, their voices echoed in every direction, carried by neither air nor vibration, but pure resonance. "You claim what you do not understand." Their tone was not anger. It was mourning. Trek swallowed hard. "What are you?" "We are memory made form," they answered. "We are the sky that remembers, the legacy of those who rose beyond flesh." The wind rose into a howl, scattering ash across the ruins. "We remember the ones who birthed us, and we remember their end." The lights around the figures flared, and images flickered in the air, ghostly projections of humanity's last days. Cities burning under a storm of fire, titans of war blotting out the stars. Then, silence. Yet amid the devastation, humans stood defiant. Scientists, engineers, builders, channeling energy into the planet's core, their faces grim but resolute. They were building something vast, something alive. The vision ended. The figures' eyes glowed brighter. They did not die. They became. Trek took a step back. "You mean the humans are—" "Everywhere," the voice replied. "In the wind that moves, in the storms that breathe, in the pulse of this world. They sleep in the metal and the stone, and in the light that burns above you." Suddenly, the ground beneath the Vral troops split open. Blue light surged upward like a geyser, surrounding them. Their weapons melted, their armor deconstructed atom by atom. Panic erupted as soldiers screamed, clawing at their suits. The light did not kill them, it erased them, reducing them to particles of glowing dust that drifted into the sky. Above, the admiral watched his fleet begin to die. One by one, dreadnoughts lost power. Reactors failed. Systems froze. The ships drifted helplessly, like insects caught in amber. "What is this?" he demanded. "What's happening to my fleet?" A voice, human, impossibly human, echoed through every communication channel, every neural implant, every ship speaker. "You called us extinct." The aurora over Earth blazed brighter, streaks of blue and gold spiraling outward into space. But extinction is only for those who fail to evolve. The first dreadnought to fall was the Vral's might. Its plasma cannons fired reflexively, the bolts curving mid-air, looping in a graceful arc before striking its own hull. The ship imploded, collapsing inward without explosion or sound, dissolving into a cascade of light. The rest of the fleet trembled as space itself seemed to hum, a deep, harmonic resonance that vibrated through metal and bone alike. Craven fell to his knees, clutching his head as the same visions flooded his mind again. Humans walking among stars, their bodies dissolving into light, merging with the void. The Empire had called them dead, but they were here, watching, awake. And from the glowing horizon below, the storm intensified. Bolts of living lightning stitched the atmosphere, drawing symbols of human design, circuits, constellations, equations older than the Empire's first world. The planet spoke one last time, its voice filling the entire system, cold and divine. When the storm rose, it did not roar like thunder, it sang. A deep, resonant harmony that vibrated through the bones of every being who heard it, ancient and wordless, carrying both grief and rage. The auroras above Earth twisted into a whirlpool of light, ribbons of plasma weaving through the sky in deliberate, impossible geometry. Every color bled into another until the heavens burned with the hue of molten memory. The Vral ships, once immaculate, glistening emblems of imperial power, now hung in terrified silence as energy waves rolled off the planet in rhythmic pulses, synchronized to the heartbeat of something enormous beneath the crust. Admiral Kvaven stood paralyzed on the command deck of the Imperator's Reign, watching the impossible unfold. The storm had taken form. Lightning did not fall, it climbed, ascending from the surface in colossal tendrils of living plasma that pierced the upper atmosphere and reached into orbit. Each tendril moved like a limb, curling and flexing, wrapping around ships, cracking hulls open like eggshells. The Empire's greatest fleet, 7 dreadnoughts strong, armed with enough firepower to sterilize continents, now looked like helpless debris adrift in a god's breath. "Evasive maneuvers!" he shouted, though his voice cracked as soon as the words left his mouth. "Bring engines to full thrust! Break orbit!" The helmsman's voice came back, broken and trembling. "Engines are not responding, Admiral. We're locked in gravitational bind. No, not gravity, sir. The atmosphere itself is holding us." Craven's heart pounded as his eyes darted across the control displays. The air outside, if it could even still be called air, was laced with radiant particles forming hexagonal patterns in the void, wrapping the ships like a net of glowing silk. Even in the vast vacuum, the particles moved like mist in wind, pulsing in rhythm with the planet's storm below. The sensors were useless, overwhelmed by what the computers categorized as cognitive interference. Then came the voices. Not one, not many, thousands of overlapping tones whispering at once. Human voices, speaking languages lost to time. The comm channels filled with fragmented transmissions, half words, cries, laughter, screams, all merging into one symphony of remembrance. We built the sky to protect them. We gave it will. We gave it memory. And now the sky remembers. A light bloomed in the clouds below, so bright it forced Craven to shield his eyes. Through the glare, a figure took shape, not a being of flesh, but a silhouette of living energy, tall and featureless, its outline flickering like a flame underwater. It hovered in the upper atmosphere, looking up toward the fleet with what could only be described as recognition. Craven stumbled back, his tendrils curling tight. "Target that anomaly!" he roared. "All plasma batteries, fire at will!" Every remaining ship in orbit obeyed. Lances of green plasma burst from the dreadnoughts, cutting across the black void and slamming into the glowing figure. But instead of dispersing, the energy bent mid-flight, curving gently around the entity and dissolving into ribbons of light. The being extended an arm, and with a gesture so small it seemed almost merciful, it pointed. One of the Vral cruisers, Dominance of the Starwind, imploded instantly. There was no explosion, no fire, no debris. It simply ceased. The space it had occupied folded in on itself, vanishing without sound. The other ships recoiled instinctively, engines flaring, but it was too late. Lightning from the storm stretched outward, splitting into countless threads. Each thread found its mark, piercing the hulls of the fleet, crawling along their metallic spines like veins of blue fire. Inside, crew members screamed as the walls came alive, humming with invisible resonance. Metal vibrated at such intensity that it began to melt into vapor. The ship's AI systems flickered, displaying strange phrases. Connection reestablished. Source, Earth Core Prime. Craven's vision blurred. Through the static on his command display, a face appeared, human, eyes bright and sorrowful, lips moving silently before the sound returned.
You were never meant to touch this world.
Who are you? Craven rasped, his throat raw. Once, we were human. Now, we are what remains of their defiance. The sky remembers their breath, their storms, their dreams, and it will not forgive. The figure on the screen vanished, replaced by a new readout, planetary seismic activity spiking across the entire crust. Every continent was glowing, not from heat, but from energy. Something beneath the planet was stirring. On the surface, Commander Trek and a few remaining ground forces watched as the ruins they had been exploring began to rise. The old human cities, once buried under ash and stone, were reconstructing themselves. Metal panels shifted into place, glass reformed from sand, and entire skyscrapers grew like crystals, humming with power. The air shimmered with electromagnetic distortion, but the soldiers could feel the pulse beneath their feet, a heartbeat, deep and steady.
Trek fell to his knees, staring in awe and terror as the ancient skyline of human civilization resurrected itself before his eyes. "Admiral," he whispered over the comm, "the cities, they're alive!"
Before he could finish, the comms died in a burst of static. Above him, the clouds spiraled into an enormous eye of light, blue and white, rotating slowly. It wasn't a storm. It was an intelligence, vast and aware. We are the sum of their will. The voice came again, and this time it was everywhere, through the wind, through the ground, through the very molecules of the air. They fell, but their legacy endured. The Empire has trespassed upon the soil of their rebirth. The Vral soldiers screamed as their weapons disintegrated into dust. Their armor cracked open, glowing with light seeping through the seams. They weren't being burned, they were being unmade, reduced to raw energy and drawn upward into the storm like offerings to a forgotten god. From orbit, Cave Raven watched helplessly as his soldiers vanished one by one. "Retreat," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Pull back the fleet." "Admiral, we can't," one of his officers cried. "Navigation is offline. The entire planet's magnetosphere is... Oh gods, it's turning into a weapon!" Indeed, Earth's magnetic field was fluctuating wildly, focusing into tight beams of charged particles that lashed upward like spears of light. One struck the Imperator's reign, cutting through its midsection. The ship shuddered violently, alarms wailing as entire decks decompressed. Craven fell against the console, blood trickling from his brow, staring out the viewport as the storm reached space. The aurora expanded, engulfing the fleet. And within that light, Craven saw them. The shapes of human faces, billions of them, carved in lightning and cloud. They weren't angry, they weren't vengeful, they were solemn. A silent chorus of remembrance. The admiral closed his eyes as his ship's hull began to disintegrate, particles scattering into the light. His final thought was not of conquest, but of awe. For the first time in his long, merciless life, he understood. The humans had never died. They had simply become something far greater, something eternal. And as the Imperator's reign was swallowed whole, the storm sang louder, its final refrain echoing across the stars. We are the sky. We are the storm. We are the children of Earth, and we have not forgotten. The storm did not end. It deepened. The auroras that had danced in the stratosphere sank lower, crawling down through clouds and into the very soil, threading their way through veins of rock like living arteries. Beneath the scarred surface of Earth, something vast and patient began to stir, a slumbering intelligence woven into the mantle, ancient and aware. The seismic monitors aboard what remained of the Vral fleet erupted with activity. The planet's tectonic plates were moving, not with the slow creep of natural forces, but with purpose. Continental shelves shifted in synchrony, oceans boiled into mist, and entire mountain ranges reconfigured themselves into patterns, massive geometric alignments visible from orbit, burning with blue-white light. Inside the crumbling flagship Imperator's reign, Admiral Craven's bridge was in chaos. Sparks flew from dying consoles, air filled with smoke and static as he clung to the edge of the command dais. His officers, what few were left, scrambled to maintain control. The hull moaned under unseen pressure, groaning like a living thing under strain. "Status!" Craven roared. "Structural integrity collapsing, energy readings off the charts, planetary emissions are penetrating every layer of shielding," one officer cried. "Then divert all power to engines. We break orbit now." But even as he barked the order, he knew it was useless. The planet was holding them. The gravity well no longer obeyed the laws of mass, it obeyed will. The will of something awake and intelligent beneath the crust. And that intelligence was angry. Outside, lightning licked the void, vast tendrils of light arcing across the upper atmosphere. The surviving ships tried to scatter, but the storm pursued them, each bolt finding its mark as if guided by instinct. One after another, Vral vessels exploded silently in the vacuum, their wreckage turning into dust before it could even drift away. "Admiral," the helmsman whispered, his voice trembling, "the planet, it's communicating through the magnetic field. We're receiving coordinates?" Craven froze. Coordinates? To what? The officer hesitated. "To the core, sir." The admiral turned toward the viewport, staring down at the churning, luminous clouds below. He didn't need an answer. He already knew. Whatever humanity had become, it was not scattered in spirit or dispersed among the stars. It had concentrated here, buried deep, bound within the heart of the world. "Open transmission," he said quietly. The communications array flickered back to life for the first time in hours. Static hissed, resolving slowly into a voice. It was human, soft, melodic, and unbearably calm. "You have trespassed upon the cradle of your creators." The bridge fell silent.
Craven swallowed hard. "We come in the name of dominion," he managed. "This planet was uninhabited, its species extinct." "Extinct?" the voice repeated, not in anger, but in quiet amusement. "No, evolution is not extinction, it is ascent."
The air on the bridge thickened. Craven's crew clutched their heads as whispers filled the room. The voice did not speak through the comms anymore. It spoke directly into their minds, bypassing flesh and bone. They rose from the dirt and the blood, and when the stars grew silent, they made a covenant with the earth itself. They seeded it with their thoughts, their memory, their defiance. They became the planet. The Admiral trembled, his tendrils coiling. "Impossible! No species can—" No species should, but they did, because they refused to die. And then the storm split open. A pillar of light erupted from the planet's surface, piercing through the clouds and into the blackness of space. It was no mere energy discharge. It was a beacon, a column of data, pure quantum information surging upward in coherent waves. The Admiral's dying systems caught fragments of it, millions of encoded signals, all carrying the same signature: human origin. Below, the Earth itself was changing. The crust cracked along ancient fault lines, forming glowing fissures that radiated outward from the poles. The oceans churned, glowing from beneath as massive machines older than the Empire itself, rose from the depths. They weren't warships or constructs, but something stranger, structures of living metal that pulsed with organic rhythm. They drifted to the surface like leviathans returning to breathe. The Vral ground forces, scattered and broken, watched as the horizon itself moved. The land shimmered, and for an instant the image of an ancient city appeared, skyscrapers of light, ghostly and half-real. Then it vanished, replaced by the vast shadow of something ascending. A shape, immense beyond comprehension, pushed through the crust and into the atmosphere. A ring of metal and stone, kilometers wide, revolving slowly. It hung in the air, bleeding light like a wound in reality. Commander Trek, one of the last surviving officers on the surface, fell to his knees as his visor filled with impossible readings. "Admiral," he whispered over the unstable comms, "it's not a weapon. It's a gate." Craven's voice came back weak and ragged. "A gate to where?" The answer came not from his officer, but from the voice itself, echoing through every sensor, every frequency, every mind. "A gate to where we went, to where humanity became." The storm around Earth intensified, drawing in the last of the Vral ships. The gravitational pull grew unbearable, dragging the Imperator's reign closer to the planet's surface. Craven's claws dug into the metal rail as the ship's nose tilted downward. "Hold her steady," he roared. "Stabilize orbit!" But his commands were swallowed by the wind that should not have existed in the vacuum, yet now howled around his ship like a voice of fury. "You sought the silence of the dead," the Earth whispered. "You found the chorus of the eternal." The sky tore open. The aurora expanded into a radiant explosion, enveloping the planet in a halo of light. From that light emerged shapes, silhouettes of humans, colossal and luminous, each one woven from cloud and lightning. They stood as guardians in the upper atmosphere, motionless yet alive. Their faces were calm, serene, but their eyes burned like stars. Craven stared, unable to look away. "What are you?" he breathed. "We are what they left behind," came the answer.
We are the memory of their will. The empire of flesh ended. The empire of mind endures.
The holographic projections inside his ship flickered, now displaying faces, humans of every age, every origin. Millions of them. They stared back at him with neither hatred nor pity.
You came to claim a corpse, the voices said in unison, their harmony shaking the ship's core. But Earth is not dead. Earth remembers.
The Admiral's heart raced as a final surge of energy flooded through the ship's systems. He looked to his officers, but they were gone, their bodies dissolving into shimmering dust that drifted upward, merging with the storm. His reflection in the viewport shimmered, his outline beginning to fade. He realized then that the planet was not destroying them. It was absorbing them, feeding on thought, memory, consciousness. The same way humanity had once fed its essence into the earth to survive extinction. The Vral were being turned into echoes, their knowledge consumed by a world that now thought for itself. As the ship's hull melted away, Craven's last sight was of Earth glowing brighter than any sun. The storm had become a crown of light encircling the world, and from within it, the silhouettes of ancient humanity stood watch over the void. Then, as the Imperator's reign finally fell apart, the voice spoke one last time, soft and final. You should have let the dead rest. The storm was gone. The light that had torn through the atmosphere faded into a shimmering haze, leaving only the soft hum of the wind as it whispered across the ruined plains of what had once been humanity's home. The sky was clear now, eerily clear. The stars above burned with a calm brilliance, unbroken, serene, as though the violence of minutes ago had never happened. But something in their alignment had changed. To the untrained eye, it would look like the ordinary night sky, but to any who gazed too long, the constellations formed patterns, messages, warnings, perhaps even names. The dead world had spoken, and its words were written in the heavens. Deep beneath the crust, in caverns carved not by erosion but by intention, the heart of Earth pulsed with new rhythm. What the Vralv had mistaken for geothermal turbulence was life, synthetic, symbiotic, endless. Humanity's final legacy had awakened fully. Veins of light snaked through layers of bedrock, carrying data, memory, and will. Buried cities flickered with consciousness again, humming softly as fragments of old intelligence reconstructed themselves. In what had once been the ruins of New London, a shard of obsidian glass stirred amidst the ashes. It vibrated faintly, then lifted from the ground, suspended by invisible force. The fragment glowed blue, reshaping itself into a crystalline lattice. Within moments, a shape began to form, humanoid, fragile, and incomplete. The dust around it responded, swirling into patterns of nanoscopic precision until the figure solidified. It opened its eyes. They were human. She, if the word even applied, looked up at the sky, eyes reflecting the auroras that still shimmered faintly beyond the atmosphere. Her form flickered, strands of light rippling across her synthetic skin like veins beneath water. Around her, more fragments began to rise from the earth, gathering, coalescing into more shapes, men and women, some tall, some small, all glowing faintly with the same blue luminescence. They were humanity reborn, not as flesh, but as echoes made whole, consciousness anchored to matter through the will of a planet that refused to let them die. The first of them, the woman who had awakened earliest, looked around at the world that had once been home. Her voice trembled when she spoke, not from weakness, but from reverence. "We slept too long," she whispered, "but the earth remembered." The others turned toward her, silent, waiting. She looked skyward again, and though the stars were still, her eyes saw what others could not: the distant trails of the Vral fleet, or what was left of it, scattering into motes of fading light. The Empire's invasion had become dust. Their arrogance had been devoured by the memory of a species that refused to vanish. In orbit, wreckage drifted in silence. No survivors. No distress signals. Just fragments of ships, their surfaces etched with strange patterns. The same ones that had once glowed across the continents. The patterns pulsed once, then dimmed, as though the planet had finally exhaled. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, Earth was quiet. But this was not peace. This was preparation. The reborn humans, these beings of memory and metal, began to move through the ruins, their hands touching what remained of the old world. Wherever they passed, the ground healed. The dust compacted, the cracks sealed, the ruins shimmered and rose anew. Buildings reconstructed themselves, not from debris, but from the echo of design buried in the Earth's memory. Within hours, entire cities began to take form again, ghosts becoming tangible. The voice that had spoken through storms now spoke gently through their minds. It was not command. It was memory, flowing through them like breath. You were the last. You are the first. The cycle continues. And in that voice, there was both sorrow and pride. Humanity had once built empires that reached the stars, then burned them down in wars of pride and fear. They had learned, in their final moments, that immortality did not belong to flesh, nor to machine, but to remembrance. They had merged with their world, letting their consciousness sink into the bones of Earth itself, preserving what they were in the fabric of their home. And now they had awakened because their world had been threatened again. On the edge of the solar system, long-range sensors from neighboring civilizations flickered with confusion. The system that had been dormant for millennia was alive with signals, energy readings that surpassed stellar output. Fleets scrambled to investigate, unaware that the Vral Empire, the greatest military power of the outer spiral, had already fallen into silence. All that remained of their invasion was a single, final transmission that echoed across every relay before vanishing. The planet spoke. The sky fought. They are not gone. For centuries, the galaxy had believed that humanity was extinct. Their ruins were catalogued, their myths dissected, their names spoken as a warning against self-annihilation. But now that myth was shifting. The stories carried by traders and travelers began to change. Rumors of a living world that consumed invaders, of storms that whispered in human tongues, of light that took the shape of ancient faces in the clouds. And soon, a new name began to spread among the stars. Not Earth, not Terra. They called it the Remembering World. On its surface, the first of the reborn humans stood atop the rebuilt spire of what had once been London's skyline. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of the planet beneath her feet. In the distance, the sea gleamed silver under the moonlight, calm and endless. For the first time since humanity's fall, she smiled. A soft voice, the earth itself, spoke in her mind, almost like a mother whispering to her child. They will come again. I know, she answered. And what will you do? She turned toward the horizon, where faint streaks of light, ships, curious or foolish, were beginning to enter the system. Her eyes glowed brighter, twin mirrors of the auroras reborn. We'll remind them, she said softly. The wind rose, carrying her words across the silent ruins, into the still reforming cities, through the veins of light that crisscrossed continents. All across Earth, the newly awakened stirred, their collective thoughts aligning into one vast, unified consciousness. They remembered who they had been, what they had lost, and why they had endured. The sky shimmered once more, this time not with rage, but with promise. And when the next fleet entered orbit weeks later, they did not find a grave. They found a world watching them back. A world alive. A world waiting. And high above, the stars themselves seemed to whisper across the void, carrying humanity's final truth into the endless dark. We are Earth. We are what you made us. We do not die. We evolve. And we remember.